Well, Kate, I mean, lying works, unfortunately.
Susan Glasser and CNN are the ones lying about the security assurances given to Russia against NATO expansion. U.S. declassified documents, which I'll show you in this video, prove that it's President Putin who is telling the truth.
How would the Americans react if we placed our missiles on the border between Canada and the United States or on the Mexican border? Not a single inch to the east, they told us in the 90s. And what do you know? They cheated. They just deceived us blatantly. 5 ways of NATO expansion. And there you go. Now in Romania and Poland, weapons systems appear.
Joining me now for more on this is CNN Global Affairs analyst Susan Glasser. It's good to see you, Susan. So Putin claiming...
Not a single inch to the east, they told us in the 90s.
The statement that he's quoted in his news conference is saying is one that is a false claim he's made many times before. Right. The implication being that the U.S. said it would not ever move 1 inch to the east. That's not an accurate statement of any commitment the U.S. made.
Her statement is inaccurate. She's pushing a false claim, and her husband, Peter Baker, is lying too. I say they're lying because it's hard to believe that they don't know what they're saying isn't true, because together they wrote a book about James Baker, and in their book, on page 380, they quote Baker telling Gorbachev there would be no extension of NATO's jurisdiction for forces of NATO 1 inch to the east. James Baker admitted it was something he said. Susan Glasser is lying on CNN, and Peter Baker is lying on Twitter with his New York Times article, which has a dishonest headline. Yet that article shows that Baker admits that guaranteeing not to extend NATO 1 inch to the east was something he said. One of the ways American pundits and politicians deny that the U.S. gave Russia guarantees is by falsely claiming that those guarantees applied only to East Germany and not to anywhere else in Eastern Europe. For example, this opinion piece published in the International Herald Tribune and the New York Times uses this tactic. It denies that the Soviets were assured that NATO would not extend beyond East Germany and claims that there is no evidence that at the time anyone was even thinking or talking about the possibility of NATO expansion even further into East Central Europe. But these denials and claims are proven false by declassified U.S. State Department secret papers and transcripts. Hans-Dietrich Genscher, the foreign minister of West Germany, reiterated the need to assure the Soviets that NATO would not extend its territorial coverage to the area of the GDR, that's East Germany, nor anywhere else in Eastern Europe for that matter. He made this point with the press after the meeting.
Wir waren uns einig, dass nicht die Absicht besteht, das NATO-Verteidigungsgebiet auszudehnen nach Osten. Das gilt übrigens nicht nur in Bezug auf die DDR, die wir da nicht einverleiben wollen, sondern das gilt ganz generell.
This transcript, released by the State Department, proves U.S. officials understood that the non-extension assurance that they were talking about, which Genscher said they were in full agreement with, applied to all the other Eastern countries too. And that brings us to the tactic of lie by omission. Many writers who cite the transcript omit the sentence which says that it applied to all the Eastern countries, not just East Germany. There's much more to say, but at this point in the video, after the information I have provided so far, I think you can see that it's the U.S. media and the U.S. State Department who are lying. Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs is correct, and in the video description you can find links to the transcripts of the meetings containing these assurances. We must get these facts to as many people as possible to expose the warmongering liars. Please share the link to this video with as many people as you can. The U.S. government's position is ridiculously unreasonable. There is no reason for this aggressive NATO expansion because the security assurances Russia is asking for are totally reasonable. Russia is only asking for the same kind of security that the U.S. demands for itself. Look at the hypocrisy of the U.S. position.
Did President Putin ask for President Biden to commit to not allow NATO or Ukraine to join NATO? And did President Biden make any kinds of concessions, such as a reduced U.S. presence or any commitment on NATO and Ukraine's membership?
I'm not going to characterize President Putin's side of the conversation or go into details in terms of what they discussed, because I think they need to have that space to be able to have robust exchange. But I will tell you clearly and directly, he made no such commitments or concessions. He stands by the proposition that countries should be able to freely choose who they associate with.
Рассматривается ли вообще вероятность развертывания российской военной инфраструктуры в странах за пределами Европы? Ну, например, вот возьмем тоже Венесуэлу или Кубу.
Я не хочу ничего не подтверждать, ничего не исключать здесь тоже не буду. В американской стилистике опциональность политики, внешней, военной, это краеугольный камень. Краеугольный камень обеспечения мощного влияния этой страны в мире. Зависит от действий американских коллег.
Could you address the Deputy Foreign Minister's comment suggesting that Russia could deploy forces or wouldn't rule out deploying forces in Latin America? Is that something that the U.S. is concerned about? Is that something that came up in those discussions?
I'm not going to respond to bluster in the public commentary. That wasn't raised in the discussions at the Strategic Stability Dialogue. If Russia were to move in that direction, we would deal with it decisively.
I have yet to see a single journalist challenge the State Department to explain this double standard. And that's shameful because the solution to this situation is for U.S. officials to have one standard of security concerns for both Russia and the United States. Reporters have been ignoring the fact that there is a double standard. Mainstream media reporters have being extremely irresponsible. It's important to note that the solution to the Cuban Missile Crisis was the concession by the United States to remove their Jupiter missiles from Turkey and Italy. The declassified record shows that U.S. officials were well aware that the deployment of Jupiter missiles near Soviet borders in Turkey and Italy in 1959 would be deeply resented by Soviet officials because it's provocative. A declassified military history of the Jupiter system reveals that the rockets became operational in April 1962, an event that may have contributed to Khrushchev's proposal made the very same month to deploy similar weapons in Cuba. The solution to this current crisis is to respect the security needs of Russia. But continually, these kinds of solutions are kept secret from the American people, so they don't understand how these kinds of situations get solved. Look how they were dragging their feet. The only obstacle to dismantling the Jupiters were political. Public discussion of a missile exchange would damage the United States' position in NATO, so they had to keep it a secret. And the Soviets agreed. So they're the ones that actually solved the Cuban Missile Crisis. The solution to the Cuban Missile Crisis, that of the United States removing their Jupiter missiles, is another thing that a U.S. president and officials kept from the public for years. And even today, pundits and politicians don't want the public to understand the situation. That the solution to the Cuban Missile Crisis was the acceptance of a single standard for the security concerns of both countries. Lying by omission is a powerful tactic. The American public's understanding, or rather misunderstanding of the situation regarding Russia, Ukraine, the United States, and NATO is largely due to what doesn't get reported or widely discussed in the media. Late in 2021, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution titled Combating Glorification of Nazism, Neo-Nazism, and Other Practices that Contribute to the Fueling of Contemporary Forms of Racism. Only 2 countries voted against the resolution condemning Nazism, the United States and Ukraine, and that vote went completely unreported in the American mainstream media. Keeping the public in the dark avoids the risk of the public thinking about the implications and reasons for this vote. It keeps the public from thinking about what U.S. officials have been doing and who they have been supporting. For additional information, you can watch these videos.
I would like to start from the very beginning, because the escalation started back in 2014. And we didn't even think about doing anything regarding Crimea. But what happened in 2014? State coup d'etat, because people were killed and burned alive.
It makes perfect sense that the majority of Crimeans would not be happy living under a coup government. When the coup happened, that's what motivated the people of Crimea to ask to join Russia. And mainstream media leaves that part out.
Foreign ministers of Poland, Germany, and France, they guaranteed that the situation will be resolved peacefully. I talked to the President of the United States. He initiated this conversation. He asked me to support the process. Everyone was on the same page. And then the next day was coup d'etat. Why? No answer, no reply. But what for? President Yanukovych agreed to all their terms. He was ready to resign the next day. Elections, the opposition would have won those elections. Everyone was well aware of that. But why did they do that? And then there was the Crimea situation. How could we refuse Sevastopol and Crimea, how we could deny people our protection, because we were put into a situation where we couldn't do anything else. There was no other way.
We have to get these facts to as many people as possible because mainstream media is working against us. Please take a look at the video description for actions you can take to help spread the word. Giving this video a like and leaving a comment helps boost the message, as does sharing the link to this video. See these other videos for more details.